All right, so today we're diving headfirst into some serious Space Force business, talking about the Space Capstone Publication,
Okay.
specifically Chapter 2, National Space Power.
Right. Right.
And, this isn't just some dusty old document on a shelf somewhere.
Yeah.
This thing is basically a wake-up call, laying out how crucial space is to, well, pretty much everything these days.
It really is. Yeah.
From how we fight wars to, like, how you check the weather in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of wild when you think about it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, remember the whole space race thing back in the day?
Oh, yeah.
Planting a flag on the moon, all about national pride.
Totally.
But this SCP, it's like it throws that whole playbook out the window.
Yeah, it really does. It completely changes the game.
So how does it reframe things?
Well, for starters, it draws this direct link between space and U.S. national security, even our economy.
Mm-hmm.
It's saying space isn't some, nice to have anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It's the backbone of modern warfare and, even just, economic power.
So no more Star Wars fantasies then, huh?
Right. Exactly.
It's about protecting what we've got here on Earth.
Yeah, it's about looking at, things like communication, GPS.
Right.
Even just knowing when a hurricane might hit, it all comes back to space.
It all does.
And the SCP makes it crystal clear protecting those systems.
Yeah.
That's what national space power is all about.
Okay, so let's break this whole national space power thing down a little because it sounds super broad.
Yeah, it's a big concept.
Yeah.
It covers a nation's total ability to use space to, achieve its goals, right?
Right.
So it's not just about military might.
Yeah.
We're talking diplomatic influence, economic competitiveness, the whole 9 yards.
So it's a lot bigger than just having the most rockets then.
Way bigger, yeah.
It's like having a whole toolbox, right?
Yeah.
Not just, a hammer.
Exactly.
You got to have the right tools for the job and, crucially, know how to use them all together.
That's a great way to put it, yeah.
And this is where the SCP, it talks about unified space action.
Yes, absolutely.
Which sounds kind of, like a mouthful.
It does, a little bit, but it's about making sure everyone's on the same page.
Okay.
The military, civilian agencies, even private companies.
Hold on, private companies.
Yep.
What's their role in all this?
Oh, it's huge, and it's only growing, think back to the early days of, aviation.
Okay.
The military, they were super involved in developing aircraft.
Yeah.
But today, commercial airlines are everywhere.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
And the same thing's happening in space.
Interesting.
You've got this booming commercial sector developing crazy new technologies.
Mm.
And the SCP, it recognizes that the Space Force can't and shouldn't do this alone.
Yeah.
We've got to leverage that commercial innovation or we'll fall behind.
So it's less about competing than more about collaborating.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a team sport now.
Okay.
And everyone needs to be playing by the same rules.
Which I guess is where this whole geocentric regime idea comes in.
Exactly, the geocentric regime. Yeah, basically, think of it as the area around Earth where most space activity is happening right now.
Yeah.
Like the busiest shipping lane in the world.
Right.
But instead of ships, it's satellites, debris from old missions, and, more and more new players all trying to get a piece of the pie.
And that's where things could get a little, shall we say, complicated.
Yeah, you could say that. The potential for misunderstandings, even accidents, it's very real.
Yeah.
And the SCP, it doesn't shy away from that at all. In fact, it specifically calls out the need for clear norms of behavior in space.
Norms of behavior. So rules of the road, but for space.
Exactly. To keep things from spiraling out of control.
So we've got this increasingly crowded space around Earth,
Right.
different players with different goals and the potential for things to go sideways pretty fast.
Yeah.
Sounds like a situation that needs, some ground rules.
Right. Absolutely. And the interesting thing is the SCP is really upfront about this.
Is it?
Yeah, it's pretty direct about this need to set up some norms of behavior in space.
Okay.
Because it recognizes that, in this new era of space exploration, with so much at stake, just hoping for the best.
Right.
That's not a strategy. That's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, no kidding.
Right.
So, okay, but what are these norms exactly?
Sure.
What does the SCP actually say about how we're supposed to, act up there in space?
Well, it goes beyond just saying, don't blow each other up.
Right.
Although, that's definitely a good starting point.
Yeah, I would hope so.
But it really emphasizes this idea of responsible behavior in a few key areas.
Okay, so like what?
Hmm.
Give me an example.
Take space debris, for instance.
Okay.
We were just talking about how crowded it's getting up there.
Right, the geocentric regime.
Exactly. Now imagine a satellite just doing its thing, and it collides with, like, debris from some old defunct mission. That creates even more debris,
Right.
which increases the risk for everybody.
Yeah, like a domino effect, or, well, I guess a space debris effect.
Exactly. It's a chain reaction.
Okay.
So the SCP, it stresses how important it is to minimize debris,
Makes sense.
designing satellites that can be disposed of properly at the end of their life cycle,
Right, you're right.
even potentially, like, developing technologies that can actively remove debris.
Wow. Okay, so it's really about protecting space itself,
Yes.
not just our stuff up there.
Exactly. It's about the environment.
The space environment. Yeah,
Exactly.
that's interesting.
And another important norm it highlights is this idea of transparency and confidence-building measures.
Okay, now that sounds kind of complicated.
It's a bit of a mouthful, yeah.
Yeah, what does that even look like in, the vast expanse of space?
Well, think about it this way. Imagine we detect a satellite, right?
Okay.
And it's maneuvering close to one of ours.
Mm.
Now, that could be totally innocent. Maybe it's just avoiding some debris.
Right.
Right. But if there aren't clear lines of communication,
Yeah.
if we're not sharing information,
Okay.
it's easy to misinterpret that action, to see it as, like, potentially hostile,
Oh, yeah.
when it's not.
That could escalate quickly.
Exactly. Things could spiral out of control really fast.
Yeah.
So the SCP, it advocates for things like, being open about satellite orbits,
Okay.
announcing planned maneuvers ahead of time,
Right.
and even setting up ways to communicate quickly between different countries that have stuff in space,
Oh, okay.
even potential adversaries.
So you're talking about, like, building trust, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
But in a place where, trust is probably hard to come by.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And it's not just about, like, preventing some big space conflict either.
Right.
These norms, these rules of the road we're talking about, they're also about making sure that space stays accessible for everyone,
Okay.
for peaceful purposes, for scientific discovery, all of that.
Right, so we don't want space to become just another battlefield, basically.
Exactly. And the SCP makes that very clear.
Okay.
It emphasizes that, the U.S., we're committed to using space peacefully
Right.
for scientific advancement, for economic growth, for, the betterment of humanity, all of that.
Yeah, all the good stuff.
Right.
But I mean, it also acknowledges that not everyone out there might share those same peaceful goals, right?
Well, of course, and that's where things get really interesting.
So it sounds like the SCP is saying, basically, that the U.S. is all about peaceful space stuff.
Right.
But we're also not afraid to throw down if we have to.
Yeah, that's a pretty good summary, actually.
Okay, good. Glad I'm getting the gist of it.
It's a balancing act for sure.
Right, so promoting peace, but, having our guard up just in case.
Exactly, and that brings us to another really important point in the SCP.
Okay, hit me with it.
It stresses that, defending U.S. interests in space, that's not just the Space Force's problem.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
I thought that was, like, their whole deal.
Well, it's more complicated than that. See, the SCP, it really pushes for this unified space action idea we were talking about earlier.
Right. Everyone working together.
Exactly. It's arguing that protecting our space stuff, it requires this whole of government approach.
Okay, so it's not just about, like, folks in uniform then.
Right. It means closer collaboration
Okay.
between the Space Force, intelligence agencies, even departments you wouldn't think are related to space.
Like who?
Well, like the Department of Commerce, for instance.
Really?
Yeah, they have a big role in, setting rules for commercial space activities. And the SCP, it recognizes that those rules, they directly affect our ability to, like, deter bad behavior in space.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's about using every tool we've got, not just the military one.
Exactly. It's about presenting a united front.
And I'm guessing our allies play a role in all this, too.
Absolutely. The SCP makes a big deal about working with international partners.
Yeah, because what one country does in space affects everyone, right?
Exactly. Space doesn't really care about borders.
Right. Good point.
And this is where those norms of behavior, those rules we talked about,
Yeah.
they become super important, because working with our allies to, like, set those rules and make sure everyone follows them,
Yeah.
that's critical to, preventing space from becoming the Wild West.
So it's like, we're all in this together, kind of.
Exactly. For better or for worse.
Wow. Okay, so we've covered a lot today.
We have.
It's clear that space is, well, it's more than just satellites, right?
Right.
It's vital to, how we live our lives, how we
Yeah.
stay safe, all of it.
It really is. Yeah.
But I gotta ask, for the average person listening to this,
Sure.
someone who's not like a rocket scientist or a general,
Right, right.
why should they care about any of this?
That's the million-dollar question. And honestly,
Yeah.
the answer is pretty simple.
Yeah.
Space impacts all of us.
I mean, I get that my phone uses satellites and all, but how much does space really affect our everyday lives?
More than you might think. I mean, every time you check the weather app on your phone,
Okay.
every time you use GPS to get somewhere, even when you take money out of an ATM, you're relying on space-based systems.
Oh, that's a good point. I hadn't thought about it like that.
It's easy to forget, right?
It is.
But space is woven into our lives whether we realize it or not.
Okay, yeah, I see that.
And the thing is, as space gets more crowded, more contested,
Yeah,
the chances of those systems getting disrupted, well, they go up too.
that's a little worrying, not gonna lie.
Imagine a world where, your GPS just stops working or communication networks go down.
Yeah, financial transactions too, right?
Exactly. It would be chaos.
Complete chaos.
And that's why this SCP, it's so important. It's a
it-
wake-up call. It's saying that we can't just ignore space.
Yeah.
We have to be ready to face these challenges head on.
So it's not just about understanding the threats, it's about being prepared to actually do something about them.
Exactly. And that's where everyone has a role to play.
Even if they're not, wearing a Space Force uniform.
Especially then, honestly, because protecting our future in space,
Yeah,
that's not just a job for the military. It's everyone's responsibility.
that's a powerful statement.
It requires informed citizens, engaged policymakers,
Right.
a shared understanding that what happens up there,
Yeah,
it matters down here.
it really does.
Yeah.
So as we kind of wrap up here, what's the big takeaway you want our listeners to walk away with?
I want them to understand that this document, this Space Capstone Publication,
Yeah.
it's not just some boring policy document.
Right.
It's a roadmap. It's a vision for the future.
A future where space plays an even bigger role in our lives than it does now.
Exactly. For better or worse.
Wow.
The choices we make today,
Yeah.
the actions we take,
Right.
they will determine what that future looks like.
Wow. Okay, that's a lot to think about.
It is.
But it's also, I don't know, kind of exciting in a way.
It is.
Because it means we're not just along for the ride, right?
Yeah.
We're actually shaping our destiny out there in the stars.
Exactly.
Well, on that note, I think we'll wrap it up for today.
Sounds good.
A huge thank you to our expert for guiding us through all this.
Happy to be here.
And to our listeners, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep looking up.